Hi, Joe Cerrone here with your CAD116 online course. Today we're going to go through Module 9. Module 9 deals with hatching, gradients, and boundaries using AutoCAD 2012. The assignment is located right here on the right hand side, in which we're going to draw a exterior wall section. And the instructions for that can be found right here in this PDF. So we can click on that and we can take a look at our project exercise. It gives us a point-by-point instructions for going through and creating this wall section. The objectives will be to set up the drawing including limits, units, and layers, use line, polyline, and boundary hatch commands, use the array, fillet, and trim commands. And so we'll get started by setting up a drawing, and what I suggest you do is you save this to your desktop, which I've already done, so I'm going to toggle back over to that. And we will start a new drawing, and we will create a new drawing using the CAD.dwt template. So I'm in AutoCAD here, and to start a new drawing I can say File, New, or I can click on the big red A here and I can say New Drawing, and I'll choose this CAD template. I'll say Open, and that gives me my default interface. What I'd like you to do is just to make sure that you have your menu pull downs on by selecting the Show menu bar. I'll toggle it off and toggle it back on. And I'd also like you to have your running object snaps, or have your settings for your icons turned off. And so we'll unenable by right clicking on these glyphs so that we can see the words. I'm going to make my screen a little bit smaller here so that we can see the PDF here, and let's get started. So, setting up the drawing, start the AutoCAD program. Start by using the CAD.dwt template. And then what it has us do is set the units for architectural and set our drawing limits. And so I'll switch back over to AutoCAD, and what I'll do is I'll select Format, Units. I'll change the units from decimal to architectural, and I'll say OK. And then I'll say Format, Drawing Limits. And the drawing limits are specified right here. I'm not sure why they chose these values, but since it's a assignment from our textbook, we'll use that. So the first question is the lower left hand corner, and I'll set that as -2 feet, comma, -2 feet 6 inches. Enter. And the upper right hand corner I'll set to 4 feet, comma, 3 feet 6. Enter. And there's another command we can do to kind of show the whole display. We'll do a View, Zoom, All, and then we'll do another command called Grid Display, GRID-DISPLAY. And we'll set that value to 2. And the reason I like to use Grid Display is it will set the grid to work within my limits. Step number 3, invoke the Layer command, and we'll create these 10 layers: border, slab, text, brick, section, concrete, earth, etc. And we'll use these hatch patterns, but we don't need to create those in the layer dialog box. To create the layers, what we'll do is come here to our Home tab, and we'll click on this Layer Properties command, and I like to just hit New 10 times. So we'll say once, New Layer, 2, and then what I'll do is I'll rename them. And so I'll click on Layer 1, I'll right click, and I'll say Rename, and we'll rename this layer Border. I'll rename the next layer Slab. Right click, rename layer Text. Brick section. Concrete. earth. And our last two are sand and wall. And these are kind of unconventional names. Typically architects will have a standardized set of drawing names for each of those different layers. We'll take a look at the colors for these. Our border will color cyan. Slab will be, whoops, text will be blue. Hatch boundaries will be red. Insulation will be green. And the rest of them are pretty well set white. And it does call for using different line weights and using polylines. And so in this slab layer, while we're here, we're going to set that line weight to 0.5. And this is just a better technique than what the textbook has us do for doing line weights with polylines in a width. And then we'll also, let's set our border line weight to 0.7 and we'll put a border on. And so I'll make the border layer current, and then I will turn on my snap and my grid. Now I'm going to right click on my settings for snap and grid, and I'll set my snap settings to 0.125 or 1/8, and my grid settings, it says grid 1 inch and snap 1/2 inch, so let's set it per that standard within our assignment. So our grid is going to be 1 inch and our snap is going to be 1/2. Alright, we'll put a border around this, and I'm going to put the line weight button on so we can actually see the line weight for it. In the border, I'm just going to use a rectangle command. Line weight on, line weight off. And so that's the difference. And that's the reason that we use the line weights within the layer command rather than polylines with a width factor to it. Alright, so we've gone and we've created this, and we've made these different layers. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw this concrete slab. The dimensions, I think, should be in this exercise showing it here, but they're not. They're on the first one. And so we'll increase the magnification here a bit and see if we can see those numbers while we do our drawing. We're going to have this foundation right here, which is going to be 11 inches by 5.5. If we do the math right here, this will be 5.5. And then this is about 1 inch, maybe 1.5. And then it just goes to a break line, which means that this is a section of the floor slab and there's more of it, but to communicate that we're not showing it, we draw this line pattern right here so that it's known as a broken section. Alright, so let's get started. We'll come over to the AutoCAD and we'll select the slab layer. It's current, so it's showing here. We'll get the line command, and then at some convenient location we'll start. You'll notice my polar button is on, so I'm tracking north. And I'm not much of a grid person. I'm actually going to turn my grid off because it kind of gets in the way. And I'm going to also turn off this UCS icon. We're not going to need it for this command. Let me hit escape and I'll type UCSICON, and I'm going to set that to off. Getting back to my drawing now, line command, start point, I'll track north, I'll say 11. I'll bring it over to the right, and I'll say 5.5. 5-1 divided by 2. I'll track north, and I'll say, let's say 1.5, and then I'll track to the side to about there. I'll go down 6 inches, and then we'll come out this way, and I'm just going to put a line down and hit escape. Pick up the line from the endpoint over here. Notice my object snap is on, so it will acquire this endpoint. Now bring this line out 9 inches. I'll bring this up 2. And then I'll draw a line to this endpoint. And I'll hit escape to exit that command. You'll notice there are some break line symbols here. So I'm going to take this line out, and then I'm going to draw a line. What I'm going to do is I'm going to infer above that line, and I'm going to turn on this O track button. And what that'll do is it'll allow me to track from a point, and what I'll do is I'll draw this kind of a zigzag shape. And then I'll infer this line, and I'll draw this down like that. I'm going to hit escape, and I'm just going to copy that rather than draw it again. And so I'll use a blue selection window, and then I'll just copy this from here to here. I may have to move that up a little bit. It looks like it's not quite far enough, and so I'll take that out by clicking on it and then hitting the delete key, and then I will move this geometry from this endpoint here to this point here. Alright, so we've drawn our concrete slab that's in step number 4. Let's come back over here and let's go down to our assignment, and we're going to have to bring this down. Step number 5, set the wall layer current, and what we're going to do is draw the bricks. And again, they're saying to use polylines. The bricks are 3.5 inches by 2 3/8 of an inch as far as their size is, and then the mortar between it is 3/8. And so right over here, what it wants us to do is to create a brick and then create the mortar for that. So what we'll do is we'll say offset, we'll say 3/8, 3/8 is our distance. We'll select the line to offset. Let me start that again. Offset 3/8, select this line and select the side. Then we will draw a line from this endpoint, and we'll draw that line up 2 3/8, 2-3 divided by 8, and we'll bring that over this way. Now notice how my snap is fighting me, so I'm going to turn off the snap button and bring it over to the right, and that's going to be 3.5. And I'm going to bring this down to a perpendicular point. Hit escape, trim, enter, part to trim. And this is supposed to be on the wall layer, and so since it's on the slab layer, I can select it and then select the wall layer. Now the wall layer doesn't have any thickness, doesn't have any color. I'm not sure if I like it being black, but we'll just leave it at that for right now. The instructions then have us use a 3-point circle to come in here and draw the mortar. And then what we'll do is we'll trim that, hit enter, and select this is the part to be trimmed. And we will then mirror that mortar. You'll notice that the line weight is different on here, and so I can use something called a match properties to match it to the layer and line type. And then I will mirror this geometry from the midpoint, shift right mouse click, delete source object no. Once we have that, the exercise will have us go through and create an array. So we've created our brick, and what we'll do is we'll array that and make 10 bricks of that. So the next step is to select the array command, put a selection box around that, hit enter, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm just going to say bring these up like this. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to down arrow, I'm going to hit enter, specify the distance between rows. Well, the distance is going to be 2 3/8 plus 3/8, or 2.75. And that will create my bricks. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit that, and I'm going to explode these bricks because these arrays are going to need to be modified. And so I'm going to explode it, and then that will break these down into individual lines. And the reason I do that is because I'm going to put a break line through that. And so I'll come back over here, I'll say line, and I'll draw a little break line symbol. And then after I've drawn that break line symbol, I want those on the same layer, and so I'm going to match properties. And then I'm going to trim the top of the brick off. Alright, so that is our bricks, and what we'll do then is create this 1/2 inch gypsum board and some geometry like this with a 2x4, and then another wall. And so what we'll do is we'll make the wall layer active, and we will then create a line for the 1/2 inch gypsum board and the 1/2 inch exterior sheathing. And so we'll come over here, and I'm just going to draw a line from the end of here, and I'm going to bring that up, and I'm just going to bring it a little bit beyond that break line. We're actually going to use that break line, we're going to extend it out a little farther. So I'll grab it with a grip, make that grip hot by clicking in it, and I'll pull it out a little farther, and then I'll hit escape 2 times to clear the grip off, and use trim, enter, select the line to be trimmed. I'll offset that line 0.5, I'll select the line and then the side, and then I'll extend that down just down here to the exercise, and we'll draw a line from here to here. And then it's got this little bit of flashing, which we can just kind of put in ourselves. I'm going to turn off my O-snap, and I'm going to draw this flashing. I'm going to use a nearest, shift right mouse click, nearest, and I'll just draw a little line here and here, and then I'll use an arc from this end point. To the nearest here. We'll draw our 2x4, which is 3.5 by 1.5. Since lumber is so expensive, they've not made a 2x4 in quite some time now. So we'll say 3-1 divided by 2 for our offset amount, and then we'll offset that 1 divided by 2, 1/2, and then we will offset this line here 1.5, 1-1 divided by 2. I will match properties to get these on the correct layer, and then I'll trim it, trim, enter, and I'll draw a line that marks that this is a stud. I'm having a little trouble acquiring the intersection there, so I'm going to shift right mouse click and select intersection, and that'll bring intersection OSNAP to the front of the commands list, making it stronger than the other commands. And so there's our wall section with our flashing, and what we'll do is we will then create a couple more lines for the area that's going to enclose the sand underneath the foundation slab and the earth ground. And so what I will do here is I will offset 4 inches this line here to the side, and then I will just eyeball a line, we'll say right here, to about here, to here, to... Now I like to use shift right mouse click nearest so that my lines touch the other lines. And what this geometry represents is the earth and sand boundary points. I'm going to turn ortho on so this line is perfectly straight. I think it will be. We'll see. There we go. Alright, and then I'm going to again match properties to get them all in the same layer. Alright, next step, if we start to go through it, is to set the brick section layer active. And so we'll say brick section, and I think I'll make this a different color. I'm getting a little tired of the black, and so I'm going to use red. And what I'm going to do in step number 12, or step number 11 rather, is to use the ANSI 131 pattern. And so I'll say boundary hatch, and I'll say ANSI 131 with a scale of 6. And so I'll highlight this, I'll say 6. And you don't have to create anything more than what's shown in here at this time. And so what I'll do is I'll click here, here, and you'll notice this associative hatch pattern will fill these boundaries as we go through and select them. Once I have them selected, I hit the X, close the hatch pattern, and we've created the hatch pattern for the brick. Switching over to our instruction sheet, we're going to do the same now for the concrete, sand, earth, and flex patterns, and we're going to set those up to these scales that they have associated with each of the hatch patterns. So we'll set the next layer on, which is going to be our concrete layer, and we'll go to our hatch pattern. We'll select our concrete hatch pattern, and they're alphabetical here, so I can get to the letter C. Of course, they are architect AR concrete. Here we go. And let's set the color here to use current, but what I've done is I've kind of got it overridden, and so I'm going to just say go by layer. Alright, and then we'll highlight in this area here. The angle pattern for that needs to be set at 0.5, and so we won't see that hatch pattern until we set that angle pattern right. And we'll click in here, and then we'll close that hatch pattern. We'll set the sand layer active, and then we'll use the hatch command again. We'll select the AR sand hatch pattern, and then we will select this area here. But before we do, again, we have to set the scale. Scale is 1/2, so that one should be okay. Oops, for some reason my hatch pattern leaked out, and so I'm going to hit escape there and see. I'm going to click on that and delete that, and let's try that one more time. Let's zoom in a little closer here. Sometimes that'll have something to do with it. And we'll get our hatch pattern for sand. Again, I'm still kind of leaking out of that border. And so we will do our hatch pattern. Jenny, I'll need to call you right back. Okay, call you back. Thanks. Sorry for that interruption. Sometimes when I have a hatch pattern like this that's leaking out, what you have to do is you have to find out where the leak is, and it looks like it's right here. So I'm going to just pull that over to the nearest. There we go, and hit escape. And let's try it one more time. Hatch. Click in here. There we go. Alright, and then we'll close that. And we'll set the earth layer active. We will select our hatch pattern. We will come in here and we will select the earth pattern. We will set the scale for the earth at 9. And these scales are kind of arbitrary depending on who made the hatch pattern. And the angle for that to 45. And we will click in here and close that hatch pattern. Alright, so that creates our drawing with our hatch patterns, and then the last part of it is to do the details of it. And there's a couple things that we need to do the details. One is in our annotates area, we need to set up our dimension style, and we want to set modify here, and we want to, on the fit tab, set this to a number, let's say 6, and we want that primary units to be architectural. Now we'll set this as extra credit for the assignment because it doesn't exactly say that we have to detail these dimensions, but I would like you to know how to set a dimension scale and then be able to put those values in. So if we were to take a look at this and say what's the thickness of this slab, we can put a dimension here from here to here, and we'll get our 6-inch dimension for that. The other thing that we want to do is in our multi-liter, we want to set the multi-liter scale to 6 as well. And so when we click on this area here, we'll say modify, and in the scale we'll select 6. And then we'll say OK, and close, and select multi-liter, and then be able to put in these liters. Turn off my ortho here. We'll click, and this will be compacted sand fill. And I'll close that. Alright, there's a few more details that you'll need to put on by adding the other multi-liters. So for example, looks like I've got a couple more hatch patterns that or at least one more hatch pattern that I missed. I missed this one that's for my insulation. So coming back here to the home screen and going to my insulation layer and then selecting my hatch pattern, I can then choose the pattern for that, which is flex. And so we'll select that as our flex pattern, and that's going to be at a 45-degree angle, and the scale I believe is 3. So we'll bring it down, we'll say 3, and we'll click in here and we'll apply that. The rest is just annotation and detailing. We can go through and put our multi-liters on here, and we can select nearest, and we can come out with a 1/2-inch gypsum board. I'm not much on the auto stacking, so I did not agree to that. And close the text editor. There's a little bit more details, but to keep this video short, I'm going to end this exercise here and have you do the rest of the details per the drawing on the first page. And so what you will do is you will add the 1/2 inch exterior sheathing, common bond brick veneer, the text for our exterior wall section, and then we will save that as Module 9. And so I'll save that to my desktop as JC-exercise or Module 9. Okay, that completes Module 9.